Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So, as I usually said before, it's a delight to see you. I know I've said that many times, but I really mean it. And I have to say, when we're talking about Africa energy, there's certain organization we cannot afford not to deal with. When we're talking about investment into the continent, there are some institutions, I would say, that you could not say you will not want to deal with if you are serious. IFC is one of those, the International Finance Corporation. From investing in the 100 millions in the 1990s all the way to the billions these days, they are definitely a player you want to be talking to. And what is even more important, so my guest today is a very distinguished lady from the sector with a very fine career, one I'm sure will make you jealous. From working as a chartered accountant in Price, moving up to investment bankers for JP and Fleming, and all the way to IFC, where she spent more than 15 years. First of all, working as a portfolio manager for core infrastructure. Now moving into the regional industry director for Middle East and Africa. So I have Mrs. Linda Munyangitewa. It's a pleasure to see you. How are you, ma'am?
Hi, Tony. Pleasure to be with you, and thanks for having me.
Excellent, excellent. So as I was saying, so your organization is very much present into the continent, and nowadays it's virtually impossible to talk about investment in Africa if we don't mention IFC at least once. So I have a number of questions I'd like to go with you, and I'm sure you'll be able to clarify some of my thinking or my concern. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, so we're talking a lot about the sector, and I wanted to know what, according to you, are the three key priorities that you identify for sustainable recovery in sub-Saharan Africa?
So, Tony, I think it really goes without saying that energy is top priority, right? Everything that we do in our daily lives requires energy. So, if we're going to recover from COVID, we have to make sure that we've got adequate power supply. We need to be powering up our factories that have shut down. We need our energy or electricity in our healthcare sectors. We need energy in tourism. The list goes on and on. So for me, top priority, energy. And then the second one I would say is digital. And we've all come to realize in the last several months under COVID that staying connected is really important. It's not just a luxury. It's really about social welfare. How do governments get money to people that are in remote areas that are not able to travel because of lockdown? How do kids continue with their education? So if we don't actually fix the digital divide, we are going to widen the sort of the divide between the have and the have-nots. So for me, digital also comes way up there as significant. I would say that the third one for me is urbanization. So we're seeing a lot of migration of people from the rural areas into the cities. So we need to make sure that our cities are actually able to cope with all of this migration. And I'm sure that COVID to some extent will accelerate the need for goods and services in cities. So how do we create smart cities, efficient cities that are able to cater for our people? For me, those are the top three. But if you want, I could always throw in an additional one, which is integration. So, I think regional integration is something that we kind of need to think about as Africa, because we've got a lot of small countries. And in some cases, it's not necessary for everybody to have everything for themselves. So, how do we connect ourselves? How do we connect electricity networks, power networks, various grids to really optimize the resources that we have without duplicating? So I think, a fourth one that I would throw in there, sneak in today, would definitely be regional integration.
So you were talking about the power that should stay on, light must stay on. And we also talk a lot about the build back better. That's what people say. So obviously the question becomes, how do we do that? So in order to rebuild the region, so I'm talking about Africa here, obviously, and sort of tackle the impact of COVID-19, I was very interested, and I am very interested to find out how IFC is supporting the continent in this aspect. And more importantly, how is IFC supporting as well the continent to make sure that the investment that should go into the critical power project that we have in the continent keep going on. One that I can, for example, mention. So we have a lot of hydro projects, talking about Egypt and Ethiopia. Everybody know about the Renaissance Dam. That's one of them. There are many other projects. So how do we support investment so that it can go into those critical projects? And how do we support the continent from rebuilding to from COVID-19 impact?
So let me take that answer from what we've been doing as IFC. We've actually taken a three-pronged approach, which is focusing on relief, restructuring, and recovery. So on the relief side, it's really about acknowledging that our client countries have been badly hit by COVID. It's meant that a lot of resources have had to be diverted from, say, infrastructure to health. And so that means that there's some level of deceleration in terms of infrastructure. As an infrastructure person, my interest is really to make sure that we don't lose the progress that we've made so far in infrastructure. I think we've seen a lot of fantastic projects being built. We've seen a lot of advancement on the infrastructure space. Still a long way to go because the gap is still significant. But really, we want to make sure that we preserve what we have. So the focus has been, how do we help governments continue, say, for example, if we stick to the energy sector, continue to pay their bills to keep the lights on? Because at the end of the day, if we're talking about a private sector company producing power for a country, they still do require to be paid because they've also got their own bills and own issues to take care of. So we can't have a situation where you are getting the power, but the companies are not being paid. Obviously recognizing in that context that it's not easy, and that not only are governments constrained, but individuals as well. So our focus has really been on working with the World Bank to see how we can support countries support at a country level. We've also focused on what we can do as IFC, and in this regard, we actually launched what we call the COVID Fast Track Facility, which is an $8 billion facility where we were looking to disburse or provide funding on a fast track basis to existing clients. So in infrastructure, so that 8 billion was split such that 2 billion was dedicated to the real sector. And really it was available for our clients to come to us and say, we need, whether it's working capital or whether it's, some sort of bridging finance to help them over this difficult period. So that's been one way that we've actually tried to support the private sector, and we continue to make that facility available. So, anybody, any one of our clients who would like to step into that, absolutely very welcome to talk to us. We're also focusing on the second part, and we're now moving really into the sort of what I call the phase 2, which is the restructuring and recovery. So how do we help restructure the sectors that are suffering as a result of what's happened in COVID? And again, in the energy sector, it's about working with our clients to understand what is their need. And clients for IFC is both public and private, right? So to some extent, whilst we may not provide financing directly to the government, they still remain a client of IFC. And obviously we've got the private sector, and we have to understand how can we support and how can we help rebuild projects that have been affected. How can we help in terms of sectors, sort of the energy sectors that have been impacted? What can we bring to the table? And really, we are rolling up our sleeves on that front, and working with clients to see how we can move that agenda forward. At the end of the day, it's important to make sure that we have energy at the ready for recovery. Because how do you recover if you actually don't have energy? How do you recover if your power plants have been shut down? So we really need to make sure that the power plants continue to operate. And beyond that, in the recovery, we also need to start thinking, out of the box, and also use it as an opportunity to explore some of the underexplored areas of energy. If you look at renewable energies, for example, we've got an abundance of solar and wind. So is it now an opportunity for us to start looking seriously into that? Because it does provide a cheaper source of power. So can we now start, playing with our energy mixes to make sure that we increase solar to the extent possible? Can we start thinking about how we really put mini grids to work and help reach those people that are not able to access energy. So it really is an opportunity to rebuild, but also to take things forward and see if we can leapfrog some of the opportunities that are presenting.
How can IFC use its position to open up markets for private sector investment so that Africa can be helped to meet that needs, and also more globally to meet the need as well that was established by SDGs? Hopefully the question is clear.
So Tony, you are absolutely right. There is no single party that can close that gap. The public side cannot do it on their own. DFIs cannot do it on their own. It needs everybody to collaborate. So what is IFC's role in all of that? I hear you ask. And it leads me to upstream. I'm sure you've heard us talk about our upstream initiative. And effectively, what we're doing in upstream is it's an opportunity for us to create markets. To really put it simply, it's about creating markets. We came to the realization that Africa is not lacking, well, rather Africa especially is lacking in bankable deals. The need is there. We all know what the need is, but to actually put deals on the table that the private sector can finance has there's been a significant gap. So what we've done is we've put together a unit, and in Africa and the Middle East, this is actually quite a significant unit for ourselves. It's about 25% of the team that we have covering the Africa and Middle East infrastructure space. So we've got professionals that are dedicated to looking at each country, looking at the different sectors and trying to understand how can we help unblock the roadblocks. So are there policy issues? Are there regulatory issues? Is it about bringing the right parties together? Is it about us getting involved in development? And we actually are doing that. So we're not your typical developer. We're not, we cannot claim to be experts in, solar or hydro, but we can partner up with people that are experts in that. So if you look, for example, at the project that we're working on in Malawi at the moment, which is a significant hydro in Patamanga, we've actually participated in that. We've actually helped create that project from scratch, from absolutely nothing, ground zero. And we've collaborated with various parties. We've collaborated with the World Bank. We've collaborated with the government. We've collaborated with the private sector. And here we are, actually have a deal that is progressing that will eventually come to the market for financing. But what that underscores is the need to actually be creative and help create the projects, and also help understand the way we approach it is that it really is about what does the government need, because we can come up with all sorts of interesting ideas, but at the end of the day, if that's not a priority for a government, there's no point. So I come back to my earlier point earlier on, which is about we actually need government at the table because they help in terms of the policy and the regulation. And then we can bring in everything else. We can bring in the money, we can bring in the private sector, we can bring in the technology and the know-how. Everything else becomes easier when you create that enabling environment. And really that is what we're trying to unpack with our upstream team. So one of the key issues that we're looking at, for example, is mini-grids. We all know that mini-grids have been around for a while, but there's so few and the need is so huge. So how do we actually scale that up? How do we actually create an environment where it's easier to draw private sector into the mini-grid space without having such heavy subsidies from the government, so that you can actually free up some of that public funding to meet other needs? So that is an example of initiative that we're looking at. We're looking at, for example, brownfield hydros. There are a lot of hydros in Africa that are not operating optimally. Can we perhaps help to review what's there and see if there's a role for private sector to play in terms of fixing and repairing some of those hydros so that they become generating assets once again. So the scope is significant. There's so much work to be done, and really you can pick any topic, pick transmission, for example. what can we do to assist in transmission? So again, we are putting our thinking caps on and trying to figure out what are the solutions for transmission. Transmission is such a capital-intensive sector, and should really governments be handling that all by themselves? Should there be a collaboration with the private sector of some sort? And if you collaborate, how do you collaborate? Because it's not an easy sector. It's not an easy sector for government. It's not an easy sector for private sector. But there must be a solution some way that brings both parties together for the benefit of everyone. So I'm really excited about our upstream endeavor, and I really do think that we are going to see in the coming years, real results out of that. And a final point on that is, if you recall, we developed the scaling solar. And as a result of that, we actually saw, the ability for developers and governments to collaborate and bring affordable solar energy to countries. And we've seen, the prices that Zambia was able to secure, and Senegal. So these are live examples of, what we can do with upstream. So the other thing that we're thinking about is there's a lot of wind resource in Africa. Can we, maybe think of the similar model? But it all comes back to having to collaborate with government and having that environment where the government will say, yes, actually, I do want to have wind energy, and tell me what I need to do to bring this, to bring this to fruition. And this is where it all starts.
Well, Linda, I mean, keep your excitement, because definitely you would need that in my next question. But I have to say, talking about scaling solar, so as an engineering company in the field, as a practitioner in the field, I definitely really love this program, because yes, I have been seeing some result and some differences there. So the reason I'm particularly excited to talk to you today, because I'm talking to you, I would say different level, many level, because for me, you are a professional in the field, but you're also the regional infrastructure industry director for Middle East and Africa, but you're also an investor clearly in the sector. You're also an African woman in the sector and a woman. So I wanted to know then, with all of that, just one single person, what makes you so hopeful when you look at opportunities in the continent?
So Tony, you said it, right? I'm an African first and foremost. And the African continent is dear to my heart. So whatever I can do to facilitate and to help develop the continent, I will do. I have young children, and I want to see them, I don't want to see them flee to somewhere else to find a better life. I want them to stay in Africa and actually enjoy this beautiful continent that we have. So, so I'm really passionate about helping to unlock issues and problems that we are facing on the continent. If I can, help build one power plant somewhere in some country, and it provides energy to, a poor community where kids are able to go to school and get an education, I can sleep well at night. So for me, really, it's around me every day. We know the numbers in terms of the billions that are needed to build infrastructure in Africa. You just have to literally walk down the street and realize where what the needs are. And I think it'll be hard to ignore that. I've always said that I'm so passionate about infrastructure. I actually live and breathe infrastructure because it's all around us. It impacts everything we do. And if I can be a part of that, if I can be a part of that change, if I can be a part of that, group of people, or whatever you want to call this amalgamation of people that can support the development of Africa, count me in for sure. It's not even a second thought in my mind.
Excellent, excellent. I can definitely see the passion there. So let me come to my last question for you, Linda, because you alluded to that. So nobody can do it alone, right? So we definitely need to work all together in here. So partnership, it's the key words, and some other would say collaboration. And the key thing with IFC, because your position, so you're able to engage with so many stakeholders, so many different countries, so many peoples. And I wanted to know, for you in particular, and maybe also the IFC as a whole, so why do you love, and what do you love when working with partners in tapping into the Africa infrastructure sector and to grow it? So why do you love doing it, and what is it that you see?
So I think it all starts with having a similar vision. I think we all have the same objective. We're all trying to support the development of infrastructure on the continent. So that in itself puts us on the same platform as a starting point. So we all really are committed to, putting power where it's not available, clean water, digitalization, and so on. And I think, the recognition that we all bring different things to the table is also very important. IFC, we can come, and it varies on a project by project basis. So you may see partners, AFDB, they come with their, with certain qualities and certain attributes that are helpful in terms of, pushing projects forward. We've got European DFIs that also, come with different, sort of different characteristics and different contributions to the table. So I think we all have something to add. And I've seen in cases where we actually are collaborating and working with other partners that things tend to move better, because you have a lot more people and a lot more support from different aspects. So whether you're talking about DFIs or you're talking about donors, one would not naturally think about donors as a natural partner for the likes of IFC, but we use all DFIs use blended finance, for example, and that helps us to create bankable projects. Now, if the donors disappeared and we didn't have access to blended finance, then it would actually make our lives a little bit more difficult, and our delivery of projects will be a little bit more difficult. So really, collaboration for me is extremely value adding, because it really is about recognizing that the diversity of our institutions actually contributes to us being delivering better.
Okay, that's great. So just in final comment, Linda, so what I would like to say is that for all the work that IFC has been doing for the past decades, so definitely IFC has been a force for good for the continent, and I'm hoping that it will continue to be. And I would also say, so as a proud African woman, and one that is very excited, so we're talking about IFC investing hundreds of millions in the 1990s, and we now move to billions now in 2020s, put it that way. But Africa is $1 trillion, $2 trillion economies, even more, I think so. So I'm very much hoping that IFC will be able, if not to mobilize trillions of dollars for the continent, but definitely have moving towards this direction. And I'm sure with the passion that you have, I'm sure you'll be contributing. So it was a pleasure to talk to you this morning, and I wish you a very good day, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. It was such a great conversation. And thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate that.